Hey there, friends. Welcome to our part two of revising for our countdown to the test. Before we kind of get into a couple of revising questions, just to kind of warm us up for the coming several days, I want to make sure that we understand the difference between reading and revising. So I'm going to hold my hand up. If this is a passage, well, it has an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. If it's a paired passage, then it has two introductions, two bodies, and two conclusions. And so the idea is that your students have to have an understanding of the content and critical thinking in order to answer reading questions. When you're doing revising, you have to improve the content of that passage. Or if this is a paragraph, then you can think of the thumb as your topic sentence, what sometimes is called the main idea of a paragraph. And so I'm going to show you my graphic organizer that has questions at the paragraph and passage level uh, at the on the top of the hand, and then the arm is going to be, for the most part, what many of you use. It's going to be add, remove, replace, move something. As I mentioned to you in the previous video, Texas does not use the word substitute. So I'm going to show you my Read-Vising Graphic Organizer. And this is going to help those of you who have kids who struggle with reading kind of think of the arm like a ladder, the portion of the Read-Vising Graphic Organizer like a ladder. So they can start on the bottom of the ladder with the easiest type of revising questions and then build their way up from there. That way, if your kids can at least get half of the revising questions, say, correct, that might give them a better chance of moving uh, up the growth ladder to approaches, to meets, to masters. So let me show you um, the Read-Vising Graphic Organizer that is part of your set. For those of you that got the hard copy, you're going to be getting 25 of these like this. I went ahead and drew a quick uh, arm just so you can see that if the kids who struggle, if they can start at the bottom of the arm, it's going to make more sense. Now, I do not claim to be an artist, so that's why I do most of my stuff uh, in a digital format. So as you look here, you're going to notice that there's a green bracelet for adding. And remember, I want you to think of this blue bracelet as something. Removing something, replacing something. And so this is why TA doesn't use the word substitute, because they'll say what word or phrase or sentence or transition could best replace blah, blah, blah and improve the meaning. Well, when they say that, it means they're asking you to remove something first, red, the red bracelet, and to replace it, green, with something else, something goes in. So as you see here, I've got my remove and replace. Something goes out, red, so that something can come in. Add, green. And so they sell those little um, neon little bracelets. So I'd recommend, if you can get your hands on some green, yellows, reds, and blues, you can kind of up until the test remind your kids, oh, I need to be able to add, remove, replace, or move something. So continuing um, down, the move part means don't add anything, don't remove anything, replace anything, just change the order. change how they are grouped. In other words, if there's a sentence followed by another sentence and they say, what is the best way to combine? Well, I'm gonna show you in the next video. Don't change the meaning or the content, just move the sentences together using some form of uh, comma with a fanboys, to make a coordinating conjunction. Sometimes they combine sentences because one of them is too short. Sometimes if there's a compound subject or a compound predicate, they'll combine. Uh, and uh, Lots of reasons, but um, my little song, Come Together Right Now, is taking sentence, whatever, what's the best way to combine sentence uh, two with sentence one? And you would put those together without changing the meaning or the content. Okay. And then the something part. And so here are the somethings. And starting at the bottom of the ladder, you would teach your kids, look for a question that just asks you to replace a word. And what that means is the word that's there is too vague, and you replace it with something that's more specific, or they'll use the word precise. And so usually of the 8 questions for elementary, the 9 that are going to be for middle school and the 11 for high school, there'll probably be at least one question where they have to take a word choice that's too vague. Now, the cool thing about reading is you're just going to see a word and you just have to know what that means. And so they're going to be asking for the definition, and your kids will have to see it in the content in context, and then decide based on the dictionary definition which one is the correct answer, the meaning for that word. Okay. Add, remove, replace one phrase or one line. Just change the order of the words around the words in 80 ways. No, I don't need 80 ways because most sentences are just 10 to 20, maybe 25 words in length for high school and middle school. So you would just make sure the kids are changing the order. Another yellow is up here. What they're going to do sometimes is say, I have this box question or box sentence in revising, and they'll ask your kids where it goes. And so if this is a paragraph, then you would number each sentence in the paragraph. And so just for example, if this is paragraph, and the idea is that you would laminate this if you choose not to let your kids draw their own. But I think for test day, for the kids who struggle, have them at least work on the arm part so they can say, you know what, I'm going to look for questions about one word, about one phrase, about one line, where they're just changing the order of the words, where all they're doing is bringing the the sentences together when they're just moving from one sentence to the next. All of these kind of sentences, these are all based on just 1 or 2 sentences at the most. And so I highly suggest that you have your kids work on these kind before they work on any others. But just so you can see, if there's a whole paragraph, the reason that's yellow is all you're going to be doing is moving it to somewhere in a paragraph. So there's the P uh, line, and there's 2 things of P's that they'll get in reading and revising. Are we talking about a paragraph, some paragraphs, or the whole passage? We'll say it's paragraph number 6. We're just going to imagine. And so paragraph 6 has like the sentence 1. I'm sorry, paragraph 6. They're all numbered. So we'll say it's like sentence 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. And so what's going to happen, they'll have the box and A might say between 17 and 18. B might say after sentence 19. C might say after sentence 20. And D might say after sentence 21. Or if there's a couple of extra sentences, all your kids have to do is draw a few extra fingers so that they can know that regardless of the uh, length of the paragraph, basically every finger, there's the topic sentence, your main idea of a paragraph, your topic sentence, your main idea of a paragraph, and that's a higher level question. Anything that's up here in the hand are the higher ones, but we're focusing on the simpler ones for right now to make sure your kids can do that. But I just wanted to show you one of the yellows where you take something and move it. Um, and sometimes they'll have um, four choices and they'll say a sentence needs to be added after sentence 18. And so um, if you have four choices, then the other way to do it would be this, where you say, uh, whatever the content, what you do, whatever you call the hashtagging or the keywords of sentence 18, sentence 19, sentence 17, 4 or 5 words that your kids could write with a dry erase, ready erase, or permanent marker, whatever way that they can use to erase it afterward they're done, then they would see what the content is on sentence 18 and then plug it in the right spot. Okay. So the idea is that we work on words, a phrase, a line, the order, the combining, and up to the transition level. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of questions. And because of the short answer, the response, the answer, we'll call that the red light. And we'll think of the T as the topic. And so if you look in here, there's a Q with a T. And so instead of using it as a transition, you'd say, okay, I need to somehow transition. Um, no, I just have to connect ideas that I have a question, Q, about a certain topic. And so the short answer is open-ended, where instead of responding with the answer, look at this red arrow, which means stop, wait. The answer has to be based on evidence. So your kids would uh, go straight from the topic to go to the evidence, and they would find some evidence that relates to the question. And then they could put their answer, their response. And the cool thing is, you get the people that made this evil test, TEA, go straight from the topic, T, to the evidence, E, and to the answer. And so when the student has the answer and the evidence, they'll get a 2. If the student has the answer or the evidence, they'll get a 1. And again, even though this is not revising, I wanted to show you how to use it, this portion at least, with the reading as well, because it's a very difficult concept. And then the 0 would be if I cannot find the answer nor the evidence in the student's response, then it would be a 0. Now, keep in mind, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but because the short answer, evidence, response is in the reading portion, uh, all your students have to do is make an attempt to write their evidence in a complete thought, find one piece of evidence based on the topic of the question, and they could write it here, and then they could move it over um, to the um, to their computer online response if they're using their own little arm like I have here. Okay. And then they would put the answer. Now, remember that the part A and part B one, if the student has evidence and it's correct on the constructed response, not the open-ended, but the already, if they if it'll be A, B, C, D part one, A, B, C, D part two. If the evidence is correct, but the answer is wrong, then the students don't get points for the evidence. So on that, uh, A, uh, A leads to B and B is dependent on A. Remember that A has to be correct, 911, in order to get the point. So if A is correct and if the answer is correct, but the evidence is not, then they'll get a point. But if the in the constructed response, if the answer is incorrect and the evidence that they choose for part B is correct, they won't get the point. The other reason for getting 0 points is whatever the student typed, it's completely indecipherable, illegible, or incoherent. There has to be almost nothing that's understandable. And even though grammar is not supposed to count, if they can't understand what your students typed, even though the evidence is written plainly and correctly, they can't even transcribe evidence, then that will probably result in a 0. So that's how I would recommend that you teach your kids. And then if you look to the right, because some kids struggle with reading, another arm that you can do is artists remember more setting or senses. You're working on imagery. I want to be able to paint a picture of whatever it is that I'm reading about so I can have a better understanding. And I can do that for both reading and for revising. Actors remember more story sequence, actors remember more scene sequence, or actors remember more stanza sequence because in a story, in a play, or in a poem, lots of times there are characters actually doing things in a certain order in a sequence. And so this will help them use the acronym ARMS in a reading way or in a revising way to help them understand by either drawing pictures or acting out a little piece. Now, the last thing, um, whenever the student have to add a sentence, it might be that the effect is there and they have to add uh, a cause. The action might be there and they might have to add a reaction. And the conflict and the resolution, there might be when you move from one idea to the next, the students will have to realize that the the conflict and the resolution don't connect. So whenever you're moving from one idea to the next, you'll be uh, one of these two will be missing, and so you'll have to add one that's missing, or one of these two that are here are going to be wrong. And so they have to remove, for example, if the action reaction relationship between two consecutive sentences, if the reaction is wrong, then they would practice this concept of removing that reaction and replacing it with a different reaction that would be more appropriate and more specific to the content and the context of the passage. And so that's how I would use the transition, the teeter, transition, totter, see, transition, saw. And so from here down is what I would recommend you teach your students who struggle to do those kinds of questions first before they get into adding a sentence to a whole paragraph or adding a uh, sentence to a whole passage, which would be some of these here. What sentence could be added to clearly state the focus of the entire selection? That would be the eyeball there, the focus. What sentence could be added to clearly state the central idea of the selection? and I would touch the center, and you can feel if you touch the center of your hand, all your muscles moving. And so if everything is about whatever this letter is, then that's correct. But some kids will only, they'll say to add it after sentence 3 or 4 or whatever inside the introduction paragraph. And so if it only has to do with the introduction, but it doesn't have to do with anything else, I'm touching my thumb, but I can't feel any muscles moving. And so it's important to make your kids understand that when you're talking about a central idea of a passage, it has to be about everything, and I can feel my muscles moving here. But if I only touch my thumb, that means that idea is only about the introduction. So it only goes with the main idea of that paragraph, not the central idea of the whole passage. So that's the kind of cool thing about using the hand to help your students. And so um, when you think of it as a paragraph, the main one that they're going to get is uh, either the topic sentence is missing, or this topic sentence is too vague. And so you'll remove the topic sentence, the first sentence of a paragraph, and replace it with another one. And topic sentence and main idea go hand in hand. But for some reason, kids don't understand that main idea of a paragraph and topic sentence of a main idea are often similar concepts uh, to work with. So that's part 2 of the revising. And again, like I said, because uh, the first people who responded to what they would wanted talked about combining sentences, I'm going to do that first, and I'll do one of each of those over the next couple of days, so you can help your kids out of the 8, 9, or 11 questions. Hopefully, they can get these 4 or 5 questions right, because it's only based on up to 1 or 2 sentences in the whole passage. So God bless. Let me make sure it says 1, 2, 1, a word, a phrase, a line, that's 3. The order, that's 4. Combining, that's 5. And then transitioning between sentences, that's 6. So that's 6 different ideas. So it's possible that 6 out of the 8 questions could be simply about 1 or 2 sentences. And so just something to think about uh, using the arm, and your kids can either just use the one and you make copies for them after you laminate, or the kids could possibly learn how to make their own on test day to remind them of the order of the difficulty of the questions they can do. So um, part 3 will be you meeting a little friend of mine that I made to help with the process of elimination. There are so many hard questions. And so in editing and revising, I have a backwards E here, and here's my forward E. So I want you to remember that in all editing questions, we have to eliminate 3 answers. All editing is going to be either multiple choice or it's going to be drop down. And my last name is McDonald. So if you think of McD's for editing, that out of the first 4 questions, we'll have probably 3 that will be multiple choice, and that other one would be drop down. And of the second passage, if there's 4 in elementary or 5 in middle school or 6, then possibly one of those questions from each passage will more than likely be drop down, which are just multiple choice. And revising, let's say that there's 4 questions, uh, 3 of them, because of the House Bill rule of 75%, probably about 3 of them are going to be regular multiple choice. One will one of one multiple choice, one will be drop down, and on the other passage, once again, 3 will be multiple choice, and 1 will probably be text entry, where it's a little open-ended response where the kids will write just a word or just a phrase or just a sentence. Now, something on that that I want to make sure you understand. Whenever the kids have to do that themselves, let me share that screen again real quick so you can, if the students have to write a word, a phrase, or a sentence in text entry, be careful when you're grading that you don't lock your students into one way or the highway, because sometimes a phrase can be written in a different order than what the score key might have, or the sentence that the student uses. The words are not in exactly the same order, but the way the student wrote the sentence makes sense. And so that's the danger of having one size fits all text enter response. Make sure that when you look at the student response, that you think of it as a skeleton key when it's a text entry, where if it's a word, a phrase, or a sentence that is being typed into the box, that think of it is, does their phrase, the word that they used, or the sentence make sense, even though it might be different than the one or the order of the words that are on the answer key. So just something that I struggle with, because some teachers were telling me that uh, their student answer was better than the answer that was on the answer key, but somebody at the district level had marked it wrong because it wasn't exactly worded the same. So that's something I want you to be cautious about. That's it for today. God bless and have a blessed evening.